We're going to finish up Module 8 here by talking about plugins and master faders. So on page 222 and 223, we get an overview of the two types of processors that we're working with in Pro Tools as far as different types of plugins are concerned. And they're divided into two categories here, gain-based processors and time-based processors. We talked a lot about this in MRT2. Remember, a gain-based processor is something that changes the dynamic range of a signal. So if you look on page 223, you have a list there. There's an EQ, a compressor, a gate, an expander, etc., etc. These, again, are plugins or particular pieces of gear that influence the overall dynamic range of a signal. When you boost a frequency on a signal and using an EQ plugin, for example, it increases the amplitude of the signal. It actually adds to it. So it increases its level. It's influencing its dynamic range. On the other hand, there's time-based processors, which are processors that affect a signal's travel through time. So if you're talking about a reverb, for example, when you put a reverb plugin on an audio signal, it is going to increase the length of time that it takes for the signal to decay. And similarly, a chorus plugin, it duplicates the signal, offsets one of the duplicates by a certain amount of time, and then when they're added together, it creates that chorusing effect. When you're using those two types of processors in Pro Tools, on 223 they talk about when you would use one for a particular type of send and when you would use the other. So when you're using gain-based processors, typically you're going to use those processors on the insert path of a particular track. So this makes sense because, let's say you have a guitar track that you want to EQ. You're going to put that particular plugin, you're going to make it localized to that particular channel. So you're going to use an insert. As opposed to having something like a reverb where you have all of the channels in your session talking to. You found a perfect type of reverb effect. You would like all of your tracks to have access to it. You would utilize a send in this case. So just as an illustration, I'm using a dynamic processor, for example, the EQ3 on my piano track. And this track is the sole track that has control of that. And then I'm going to take this aux return track, I'm going to put on a reverb plugin, and I'm going to have audio 3, audio 2, and audio 1. I'm going to have those tracks go ahead and travel to that particular reverb channel, and that happens to be bus 1. By the way, I could very quickly have these tracks go to that bus by simply selecting all three of them. I just held in the Shift key to select all three, and then I can go Shift Option click to the output to the bus 1. And now I have all three of them being sent to bus 1, and as we see here on the return track, bus 1 is returned here, and it goes through the Deverb plugin. So in this case, I now have all three of these tracks accessing this time-based processor, and they talk about this on page 223. Remember this target button right here, this red box. If I wanted to, for example, have control over how much signal from this channel, how much dry signal is going to go to the particular reverb channel, I can turn the target button off and have each track's window open simultaneously so that I have control over how much signal is going to this particular bus, which is the reverb. And again, if I command click here, I can also have access to these faders in this expanded sends view, which makes things just a little bit easier, more compact, less windows open. So I'm able to make those adjustments there. let's see. On the plugin window, we're talking on page 224 now, specifically referring to this. There's a couple different areas that you should be aware of that the book talks about. Obviously, you can see right over here that we have the track that it's assigned to. We can see that here. We also have the plugin selector, which allows us to quickly go through the same plugin menu so we can quickly change plugins. These are presets here. We can change the different preset of the Reverb plugin. The library, that's also known as the librarian menu. When you make changes with the plugin, you'll notice that the compare button turns blue, allowing you to compare the last change you've made to your plugin to see what if it sounds pleasing to you or not. Of course, there's the bypass button, which allows you to disable the plugin. You can also disable a plugin by simply command clicking it on the insert selector itself on any track. It does the same thing. And of course the target button, if I were to have, for example, another insert here, this is just showing you that I can have more than one plugin window open at a time. I just simply have to remember to turn this target button off. And now I can see all of my plugins simultaneously. And of course, I get the pinwheel. There we go. Okay, so that should make sense to you all. And last but not least, master faders. And this closes out the chapter officially, but just some words on master faders and what they're used for. Master faders are used to control the final output of a particular mix or a particular set of tracks. You can use master faders, as I said, to just control your main output, but you can also use master faders to control a group of tracks. For example, a master fader can be set to a bus. So let's say I had all of these tracks going to bus 3 and 4. I can have all of these tracks. Their main output is routed to master out, or the master output here. Shift Option click, bus 3 and 4. And now I have all of these tracks going to this master fader, and it becomes the sole control of all the outputs summed of these tracks. So you can use them as submasters. You can also just use them as your main output, like I said, of your entire session. Remember that master faders, anything you add to a master fader via an insert is applied post-fader. And this makes perfect sense because, again, if you're using the master fader as your master output or your master summing fader, and you're doing a mixdown, and you want to add a particular plugin, it's going to be applied to all of your tracks, and it's going to be a summed mix applied to it. So you're going to be able to apply that effect to all tracks that are being routed to it simultaneously. And that's why these are all post-fader, and it applies it 100% as opposed to a variable amount. You can only have one master fader assigned to one output at a time. So if I added another master fader to my session here, you'll notice that I have output 3 and 4 here selected. I am not able to go into bus 3 and 4, or if I go to output 3 and 4, you'll notice that it grays out. I'm only allowed to have one active output at the same time. One remains gray, indicating that I can only have one active at a time. Well, let's say you have one master fader here controlling the submix, and you have one master fader controlling the main out. You can, let's say that they're both going to the same output. You can actually have one active and one deactivated, and you can toggle between them by simply Control Command clicking. If I make one inactive, I can make the other active. And you can see it's doing the same thing as if I would have gone and made it inactive by just simply assigning it to the same output. And notice it says a master fader's output could not be made active because another one is already controlling it. So that's it for Chapter 8 in your book, and that should bring us to Chapter 9, obviously, which is going to be plenty of material for us to get through in the last 3 classes that we have after break. Hope you enjoyed these lectures, and if you have any questions, please let me know. You will have to complete review questions 6, 7, and 8 over break, and we will have our quiz when we come back also. So have a great holiday, and I will see you later.